Hello, it's Helen from Journal with Purpose, and today I'm really excited to be sharing with you a project that I'm working on with Royal Talens. They recently sent me these lovely products to play around with, so I'm going to be using them all during this video. So included there was the pack of Sakura Pigma Micron fine liners, 2 packs of koi colouring brush pens in Galaxy and Botanical, the Jelly Roll pens in the Moonlight range, and also these Bruinzeel pencils. And I have to say that I absolutely loved them as soon as I opened the tin before even trying them out. There's something so lovely about that natural wooden look. And I'll be creating 5 different projects in this video, and 4 of them will be inside this sketchbook. It's the Talens sketchbook and it has 80 sheets of 140 GSM paper. And I really wanted to try it out to see how it handles different kinds of things being put on the page. And alongside that, I also already had one of the Sakura black books, and I haven't tried out black paper in ages, but I thought it'd be great to have a go with the Jelly Roll pens on this black paper. So that's the final project I'll be completing in today's video. I really hope that you enjoy seeing the different projects I create today, and that perhaps you'll also get your own sketchbook or journal out and create along with me. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is creating this floral design, and for that I'm going to use the 02 nib to start with from the Micron range. And I'm going to use this to add all of the thicker outlines. So in this set you get 6 different fine liners and also a brush pen, which I'll be using a little later on. For this peony design, I've recently been really inspired by a new book that I've got called How to Draw Modern Florals by Ali Koch. And there's loads of really lovely designs in there, so I thought it'd be great to try out the different Pigma Micron pens just to get a feel for their different thicknesses when I go back in and add all of the details. In case you don't know much about Royal Talens, they are a Dutch company and they have lots of different brands. So like the Sakura, Talens and Bruinzeel that I've just shown you. But they're also the company behind Ecolime, and I have their inks and brush pens, which I love using. But also the brands of Amsterdam, Van Gogh, Cobra and Rembrandt. And they sell a huge range of different paints in acrylic, watercolor and oil, along with the pens, pencils, pastels, papers and brushes, pretty much any art supply you can think of, in a range of different qualities right up to professional artist. So I will of course leave their website linked down below so that you can have a look at all of the amazing different products that they offer. Now that I've finished the outline of the flower, I'm going to use 2 of the other different size pens in 01 and 005 to add the details. And I really love having these range of different nibs, it makes such a difference. And as you can see with the 005 nib, it's really tiny and it's great for just adding light strokes to your page. And all of the Micron fine liners have archival ink in them. For the details on the flower, I'm just going to be adding lots of tiny delicate strokes. And it's something I've been wanting to work on for a while now, is adding more detail and depth to particularly my floral drawings. So that book I mentioned has been a great start, and I took lots of flowers of my garden, especially over the last few months, so I want to start looking at some of those photographs and trying to recreate them in this style. So I know I'm going to be using these pens and these sketchbooks a lot over the coming months. I think it'll be a really nice thing to focus on, is improving my skills in this area throughout the autumn and winter months. I'd love to know if you've got any creative projects that you're working on too. Alongside adding more detail to my sketches, I also really want to focus on shading with pencils. And I've been watching quite a few videos on YouTube, and I've also taken one Skillshare class, but I've got a few different ones in mind because I love using pencils. I think they're a great way of adding colour, but I really want to learn all of those different kind of tips and techniques that can go along with it. Now that I've finished all of the line work, I'm going to use the Bruinzeel pencils to add colour. And in this tin there are 12 coloured pencils with a 3.3mm core. So I'm starting off by adding a yellow centre, and I'm then using this pale peachy colour, and I'm starting off by adding it really lightly all over the flower. And that's one thing I have been learning by watching the different videos, is to start off with a really gentle layer and just keep adding the layers one at a time over the top. So that's definitely something that I've been practicing and will continue working on over the coming months. I'm now using the purple colour just to add a little more contrast around the outside of some of the petals. And it's really delicate, but I'm extremely happy with how it's starting to look, and I'm now going and adding that peachy colour back over the top again to blend it into the outside of the petals. I took quite a long time creating this piece. I just find it really relaxing to get some pencils out and just start adding a good few layers of colour. But it is one of those things when I never quite know when to call it done. But overall I'm really happy with how that came out. And the pencils worked really well for just being able to add quite a few layers on top of each other. So I'm now going to use the two different coloured green pencils to add some shading to the leaves. So I'm starting off with the pale green, and I'll then use the darker green to add some detailing. Creating this has reminded me how much I absolutely love using pencils. I find that they're a really forgiving medium to work with and definitely relaxing. So that is the finished flower. And the next thing I'm going to do is add a quote. And for this, I'm going to use the brush pen that comes in the Micron set. And as you can see, it has a lovely thick nib, and it lets out lots of ink and is really lovely to use. So the quote that I'm going to add is "Hopes and Dreams." I just thought that was a really nice uplifting quote to include on the front page of this new sketchbook. This brush pen has a really flexible nib, but I still found it perfectly easy to control. And because it's so flexible, you get those really lovely thick downward strokes and thin upward strokes. And the very last thing that I'm going to add to this page is a simple border. I felt it was just looking a little bit incomplete somehow. So I'm just going to add some dashed lines all the way around the outside. I love adding simple borders, so along with dash lines I also often use dots or little crosses or zigzag lines so that it looks like stitching. So that is now my first page completed in the sketchbook. It's definitely the project that I've taken the longest on in quite a while, but I really enjoyed it and just relaxed playing around with those different pens and pencils. As you can see, there's absolutely no bleed through or ghosting onto the next page, which is brilliant because it means I don't have to worry about leaving blank pages, which I do in some of the sketchbooks that I use. So for the next project I'll be creating, I'm going to be using the Koi colouring brush pens from the Botanical set. And I really love how these sets are grouped, knowing that you've got all of those lovely greens together. So I'm going to try out some brush lettering, but I'm going to be doing it all in capital letters and do each of the different lines using a different pen. The quote I'm going to add is "Time to plan and make our dreams come true." I think because it's been such a funny year and probably most people's plans have been kind of thrown into disarray, I'm starting to think about what 2021 will bring, but more importantly, what I still have control over. So I'm starting to put all of my plans in place for the end of this year, but also thinking about what I really want to achieve next year. So I thought this was a great quote to add to my pages. And as you can see, these brush pens also have really lovely, thick, flexible nibs, and they're just perfect for being able to add this style of lettering to your sketchbook or journal. And I really like how all of these colours are starting to look next to each other. When adding quotes like this, you could definitely draw in some pencil lines to help make sure that you get your spacing even. But I have to say I did do a few practice attempts beforehand just to make sure that I'd be happy with how that lettering would look. Now that the lettering is done, I'm going to add some simple decorations and I'm going to add some branches with leaves on. So I'm going to use the very last pen that I used for the lettering along the top, and then for my branch along the bottom I will use that pale green, the first pen I used. And it's one of the things I really love doing with brush pens is using them to add the leaves, because you can just do it in one simple straightforward movement by just flexing that nib. So you add the first little bit of the branch and then flex it to get that lovely rounded leaf shape. So now I'm going to do exactly the same process along the bottom but in the opposite direction. This is a really fun way to add some simple decoration to your page, and I also love using this same technique to create floral or leafy wreaths around a quote or cover page in my journal. I really love the different colours of these pens, and especially as I often use botanical kinds of designs in my journals, I know that I'm going to be using these a lot. So that's my second project now all complete. For this next page, I'm going to be using the beautiful brush pens in the Galaxy set. And I'm going to be creating something similar because again, I wanted to see all of those colours in use. But I'll also be adding some watercolour at the end. And the quote that I'm going to add on this page is, "In dreams we enter a world that's entirely our own," by the wonderful Albus Dumbledore. There are so many wonderful Harry Potter quotes. I've often been tempted to do a sketchbook just devoted to different quotes and illustrations from those series. I just find them so comforting, but I think it just all came at the right age for my daughter. So we read through all of the books and watched the films. So it definitely still has a really special place in my heart. The same as with the last page, I'm just so pleased with how beautifully these colours go together. I definitely think I'm going to keep the pens actually in the packs themselves, because just to know that you can pick up one set and that they just all tie in so nicely is going to be something really lovely to use again in the future. So now that I've added that quote using the brush pens, I'm going to add a couple of stars using the Micron pen. In fact, I'm going to add 3 and just use those to help centre out some of that quote. And I'm also going to write Albus Dumbledore along the bottom. And for that, I'm going to use a serif style font. I really like using this style of font. I think it just adds something a little bit different to your style of writing. And sometimes I'll do a whole journal page in this style, but it definitely does take a little bit longer than just using my normal writing. For decoration along the bottom, I'm going to doodle in a simple feather. I thought that would tie in really nicely with the quote. So I'm going to start off by lightly sketching it in pencil, and then I'm going to use one of the Pigma Microns. And I'm going to be adding the water over the top of that to create a watercolour effect. So I really wanted to test how waterproof the microns are and also how well the brush pens use as a watercolour effect. So that's the pencil sketch done, and I'm going to use that Pigma Micron to just go over that to create the outline of the feather. I really like it when pens can be used in a few different ways, because it just feels like you're getting better value when you can play around with them to create different effects. So in both this project and the next one, I'm going to be sharing 2 different ways that you can use the brush pens to create a lovely watercolour effect. So that's the feather doodle now added with the black outline. And I'm now getting a paint mixing palette. And I'm going to use the lightest pink pen to just scribble lightly on the bottom to transfer a little bit of ink into the mixing palette. And you don't need lots for this, and you can always add a little more if you like later. And I'm then going to use one of the deeper pinker colours so that I've got some ready to add into my wash. I'm now going to use a paintbrush with some water and use that to mix in with the ink in the bottom of the mixing palette. And you'll see it creates this lovely wash that you can then add straight onto your sketchbook page. Because I've mixed the ink in with water, they're obviously going to be a lot paler than when I use them for the brush lettering, but you can keep adding extra layers over the top, and it's really nice to know they're still going to tie in with the overall colour scheme that you've picked for your quote. So I've added a little more ink, and then I'm adding that over the top whilst it's still wet. That's given a lovely delicate pink shade to my feather. And I'm now going to use some of that darker pink and just drop in some of the colour on the feather again while it's still wet to let those colours merge together. And I really like doing this. It's great for all sorts of designs, and definitely things like galaxies and skies if you just want to add in some gentle blooms of colour. I'm also going to then add one more of the colours in the purple and do exactly the same again. Just mix it in with some water and then drop that onto the feather whilst it's still wet. And I really like that effect. I think it's so pretty. Again, the paper's held up really well. It's wrinkled ever so slightly under the water, but definitely nothing more than I'd expect. And once I dried it properly and closed the book, it's flattened out really nicely. So that's that page now complete, and I'm really happy with how it's looking. And I hope maybe that gives you, again, some new ideas to create inside your own sketchbook or journal. For my next project, I'm going to use those same Galaxy brush pens, but I'm going to do something a little different this time. So I'm going to pick two of the colours. I'm starting off with this light pink, and I'm then going to use one of the darker blues to transfer some ink. So I'm going to use that darker pen and just rub it along the pink nib so that I transfer some of the ink across. And this gives a really lovely effect when you're lettering. So I'm going to letter out the quote, "Keep on going," and that you'll see that you get a kind of dual tone effect. It starts off with quite the deep blue that I added on top, and then it will gradually transfer over into that lighter pink colour. And that's a really fun effect that you can create with these brush pens, and it's always good to add the dark colour on top of the lighter colour and just let that transfer gradually happen as you're writing on your page. And once you've finished your quote, if you've still got any of the darker ink left on top, you can just gently scribble with that other brush pen until all of the ink comes away, and then it will return back to its original colour. The next thing I'm going to do is use one of the micron pens to add an outline all the way around my lettering. And sometimes I do this just along something like the bottom and right hand side to add shading, but other times if I really want that lettering to pop out, I'll add it as an outline all the way around the outside and inside of each of the letters. And not only does it help it to stand out, but if you're newer to brush lettering and you've got some wobbly lines, it's a really great way of being able to tidy up some of that lettering. The next thing I'm going to do is one of my favourite ways of adding splashes of colour and the watercolour effect to your page. So I've got some plastic packaging and I'm using those pens to scribble straight on top of it. So I'm adding lots of the lighter pink and also some of the deeper purple. And you don't have to be precise with where you add these at all, just add as many different colours as you like. I'm then going to use a water spritzer to add some water on top, but you could also just dribble some water with your fingers if you like. And I'm not adding loads, just enough to make sure that those colours run. And once that's done, I'm going to turn the packaging over and gently tap it on top of my page. And I'm going to do that in lots of different places. You'll see how just a little bit of ink goes a really long way. I'm just going to keep blotting it down and use my fingers to help transfer that ink all the way around the page. And this is such a fun and simple effect. I often do it on my journal pages, but also things like gift tags as well. It's just a really lovely effect. As you can see, a little really does go a long way with this kind of technique. I absolutely love how those two colours have run into each other and actually created about 4 or 5 different colours all across my page. The last thing that I'm going to do to this page is add some highlights to the lettering. And for this, I'm going to use one of the Jelly Roll pens. And I'm just adding a curved line and dot right on the top of each of the thick downward strokes. I really love using these Jelly Roll pens. In fact, I already have one of the other packs. They're great for adding details to lettering, but also in the final project that I'll be creating, I'll be using just the Jelly Roll pens, and they're really lovely to use. The last project I'll be creating is in this lovely little black book that's from the Sakura range. And one of the things that I've already done is try out those Brinzil pencils, and I just did some swatches at the front, and I'm so happy with how they came out, so that's definitely something that I'm going to be trying out a little bit more in the future. And you'll notice I always tuck the elastic bands inside the back cover when I'm using them, and that just helps the notebook to lay flat. So for this project, I'm going to be using the Jelly Roll pens from the Moonlight range. And these are 06 fine with a 0.35mm nib. I'm going to start off by creating an open circle, and I'm going to do this by using 2 wobbly lines, and this will form the basis of my floral and leafy wreath. And these gel pens stand out really nicely on the black paper. And it's really simple to create. You don't have to worry about being too precise with a wreath like this. So now I've got that basic shape, I'm going to add in some leafy branches using that same really pale green pen. I'm really pleased with how vibrant these colours are looking, and I'm already thinking how great it would be to do things like gift tags at Christmas for adding different holly and berries on, so that's definitely something I'll be trying out. So I'm now using one of the darker green pens to add in some more simple leaves. I'm going to finish off by using some of the lighter colours in pinks and purples to add some really simple floral doodles. So this is one of my kind of flicky flowers. Once the wreath is all done, I'm going to letter out the words "A New Month" along the bottom. And I'm going to use a block style lettering for this because I want to be able to add some extra decoration to it. So I'm using one of the pale purple colours for the lettering. Once I've finished with the lettering of those words, I'm going to pick one of the other colours to just add some lines alongside those broad gaps that I've left. I'm going to use the gold pen for this. Again, it's a really quick and simple way to add some decoration, and you could also use dots instead. I really hope that you've enjoyed watching me create all of these different projects using the lovely products sent to me by Royal Talens, and I hope it's given you some ideas for your own sketchbooks and journals. If you did enjoy the video, it would be great if you'd leave it with a thumbs up, and if you're new to my channel, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. And don't forget, I will of course leave the link to Royal Talens in the description box down below. Thank you ever so much for watching. I look forward to speaking to you in the next one.